Welcome everyone out there. Here's another episode of 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Sascha. Happy to join you.
And today's topic is going to be timelines. What do you refer to when you use the word timelines? Let's begin there.
I think, generally speaking, I refer to timelines as all the many differing streams of consciousness in humanity. If a stream of consciousness has, like, let's just say we have a physical stream, which is, let's say, 1 meter deep. So in all that depth, let's say we'll forget that. Let's look at a bandwidth. A bandwidth is like when you want to tune into a program and you've got to get the right bandwidth and you tune in. But in the band, there are many frequencies on this bandwidth, and each frequency carries its own consciousness, but the levels of consciousness fall within the frequency of one, or the resonance of one bandwidth. And so you get those who have a higher state of consciousness, medium, lower, and then every state of consciousness that they encompass as well. So in other words, if a timeline is a flowing stream of consciousness, it's also at the same time, it could be described as a frame of reality. So in other words, if I look at the world view, and let's say my worldview says, oh my God, everything's going downhill, we're in a hell of a mess, then that is the timeline that I will experience, because that's what I'm perceiving. Everything's in a mess. But if I look at the world and say, my God, the world is beautiful, everything is perfect, and everybody's going through their own growth experience, and exactly the way they should, then I'm in a different frame of reality and I'm experiencing a timeline where everything is perfect. So
Right.
basically, that is an overall look at what timelines or reality frames are.
Now, both the stream metaphor and also the word timeline, with both of its components, suggest something linear. A line is something linear. Time has a beginning and an end, at least the way that we look at it. And also a stream flows from somewhere and flows to somewhere. Now, where is that? I know that that's not the way it is in reality. So where is that concept flawed, and how is timeline still a correct word to describe that?
Well, I guess in some ways it isn't a correct word, unless you look at a timeline as being non-linear. So if you look at this timeline as being spherical, and it's neither coming anywhere or going anywhere, but it is a certain consciousness that is expressing in the moment, then you get the idea of a timeline is the conscious expression of that moment. And then once again, you get all the multiple timelines of all the different expressions of humanity. But you're right, it's not going anywhere and it's not coming from anywhere. A linear time is an incredibly powerful growth medium. Like if we remained metaphysical, we couldn't learn our lessons of cause and effect, which needs linear time, and that's pretty well everything we do. So we have a biological world that shows us what we believe. So we don't see the metaphysical world, we see the biological physical world.
Have you ever looked into the coming about of time?
No, I haven't actually. No. How you mean who invented it and what
Well,
was he
how would I guess in the process of evolution of all things, there was a time and time came to the plate, and I would also imagine, just like my intuition tells me, that there must have been a time without time. Linear
Yeah,
time, I mean, sorry, I mean linear time.
Well, we have the paradox that exists all the time of no time.
Right.
And that is, for instance, let's look at you. I see the physical and the personality, the identity you. But what I don't see so easily is the metaphysical, immortal, eternal you. But that, therefore, lives in a greater reality where all time occupies the same moment. But simultaneously, you're living in a world which is really an illusion, but a world where time and chance and coincidence and all those sort of things appear to happen. And so it's a simultaneous and rather incredible creation that we have both. And I think we stay with the linear as long as we need it. Like I spend, when I'm metaphysically traveling, linear time and I cease to have a relationship. And even I think that, anyway, I won't go there. And so the the reality is that I don't think, let's say, when we incarnated and took on human form, and we took on imagination, and we took on the great lesson of manifestation, and and that we're learning to be creators, what that actually means. Then we have this illusion of time where what we think about, we eventually realize, oh my God, I'm creating it. Until you get to a six-dimensional reality where you have, like we have about 4 densities, where you have 8 or 12 densities. And so linear time no longer serves you in the same way, and you tend to release it. So when you finish with linear time, you move in through the dimensions and then move to a density that is above linear time. But equally, you could also be in a civilization and a species where many of the beings of that are also experiencing linear time, but they wouldn't be the reactive, warmongering type quite that we can be.
I mean,
That's not our nature. That's our fear. That
right.
is not our nature.
I mean, everything we know and everything we can perceive through our human framework is very much bound to the idea of linear time, right? I mean, there's hardly anything you could conceive that is not looked at through the lens of linear time. So I'm wondering how, so if I think about other civilizations, if I think about other types of beings, and think of ideas like development of stuff or development of ideas, or even the very word development kind of suggests it begins somewhere and it ends somewhere, or it goes somewhere. You begin with an idea of an invention and suddenly you have a wheel, suddenly you have a car. So if you had a group of beings that were living together in a society type of way, however that would look, even without a physical body, I think imagining it without the physical form is kind of easy, but imagining it without the concept of linear time is almost impossible for our brain to grasp, because like it always turns around, like, where does it begin? Where does it end? How do they even communication, it begins and it ends.
But that's because we all of us look through the lens of perception, where we do that. Even the process looking through the lens creates linear time.
Right.
I've recently learned that when you perceive through the lens of your beliefs and your thoughts, then what you perceive through that lens is what you expect to perceive. And if you can find a way to not look through, I'm going through some end of term exams myself with PAN, and they're proving to be very, very tough. And so when you when you are in a situation where your lens of perception fails, completely fails. Let's say you were in the pitch dark and somebody said, "What do you see?" Now then you're going to say there's nothing but darkness, but that darkness is only to your physical eyes. So if you could look through the lens of perception, but metaphysically there is no darkness, I can see perfectly, and could let go of the lens that says this is dark, I can't see, then you will have light there, because there's never a place where there isn't light. There's only situations where we don't see light because we can't see it with our physical eyes. This is what I'm facing at the moment in my lessons, and it's proving to be very, very stretching, because we look through the lens of perception of our experience, of what we know. How do you look through the lens of perception of what you don't know? But you can change it by letting go of what you don't know and being open to a new experience of beingness. And I can assure you this is very tricky.
Yeah, it is very tricky because everything we know or everything we think to know about ourselves, not even as a group, but just the individual on the individual level, has to do with memories, has to do with experiences, and all of these experiences are framed in time.
It's interesting. I sometimes have a metaphysical experience that is so completely impossible to intellectualize it. When I come back to my physical body, I can't even think about it because it doesn't fit in a framework of thought. And so I have this inner feeling, knowing of this experience that I can't put in a frame of thought. And obviously, therefore, there are no words, and I can't write it down because it's impossible. It doesn't fit in a linear intellectual framework. And I find that, and they tell me that one day I'll get past it, but I haven't got past it yet. I find it a little bit frustrating.
Right. Yeah.
And so timelines, as you move into higher and higher timelines, then the lens of perceptions change with the timelines. And what you once believed strongly, you would look back and think, wow, I can remember when I believed such and such. Like I remember when I believed my parents were gods. And then your kids once think you are. And we all look back, well, God, talk about feet of clay. And so we move on and we have different frameworks of perception. Most people have a framework of perception for nature that holds fear in it. But then most people look more through the lens of fear and the perception of fear. They look at the world and life through fear than probably anything else. If that was to switch from fear to love, wow, this planet would move into another dimension instantly.
I have heard the term probability pattern many times from you. And is there anything that distinguishes a timeline from a probability pattern?
Yeah, and some in ways, like I've always used to say in the intensives, in that old-fashioned world I was part of, I used to say that I was there to break probabilities and to create new probabilities. And I don't think most people understood what I was talking about, because I said it fairly humorously. But if you're in, let's say, a timeline that is filled with people with strong intellectual beliefs, the probability is they will stay in that timeline for many incarnations. And in each incarnation, the probability is that their beliefs will be challenged and they will want to cling to them And we see that happening on the planet right now. There are millions, billions of people who are very, very challenged by what's going on right now. And so they're clinging to their old probability pattern, and that means they're clinging to the old timeline. So there's a correlation between them rather than being the same sort of thing.
And is it very common for humans to share timelines? Are there like a couple big timelines that a lot of people are on,
Yeah.
or is the common thing for each person, for each soul to have its own timeline?
Look at the roads throughout a country. There are big highways and super ones, and so you get there are mainstream consciousness highways that are timelines, and there are country lanes that don't take so many people that are also timelines, and those people on those timelines have some of them will be more hating and aggressive and murderous than ones on the mainstream. Some of them on other lanes will be far more loving and caring and compassionate. So yeah, there are many, I would say thousands of timelines, frames of reality, which we can move on. If I was to talk to a group of people and they had fear of shall we say, in fact, I was watching the other day Jeremy Clarkson's Farm, which I find extremely funny as an ex-farmer, and actually I enjoy it. Now, he said at the beginning of the second chapter of his stuff that cows have been known. Statistics are that cows kill quite a lot of people every year. So then the thought is immediately, okay, cows are aggressive and they go for you. But the reality is if a cow has killed a person, it would be a complete accident, or the cow was standing there when somebody held themselves on its horns or lay down to get trodden on. I mean, cows do not look to kill people. But, you know, you then create this idea among people, my God, cows kill people. And so they will go on to create a belief system and a timeline where cows actually kill people. And when this guy brings a bull in, the bull is a big Hereford with no horns. I mean, I've leaned against them. They are so quiet. They are so easy. It's ridiculous. You get a little milking cow, Jersey bull, him you give a lot of respect because just as the Jersey cow is good-tempered, the Jersey bull is as bad-tempered as she is good-tempered. And so all these sort of the way we perceive life, the cows kill people, that's going to create literally a frame of reality that a lot of people who watch that will believe, because I mean, the millions of people watch this show and they'll believe it. Oh my God, I didn't, city people, oh my God, cows kill people. Remember, when we're out in the country next time, we're not going to go and put a picnic in where those cows are.
Reminds me of something a friend of mine told me 2 days ago, that it's 10 times more likely to get hit by lightning than it is to be attacked by a shark. And yet no one really fears lightning, but everyone fears sharks.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and yeah, I mean, there's two startling facts. I'm just reading a book about aging, and I read that in the human body, in every second, there are 37 billion chemical reactions. As we sit here talking to each other, in every second in our body, 37 billion reactions, which is 27 with about 17 zeros after it. I mean, the figure is astronomical. You can't get your head around that. It's not going to make any difference to my timeline because it is such an astronomical figure. It's so impossible to grasp that you read it and you think, oh, wow, and that's it.
Yeah. So in other words, if I had to describe the concept that you shared with us, regarding timelines, I could say that a timeline is a set of lessons that we have created for ourselves based on our decisions, based on our thoughts, based on all that we have done so far as a soul. And that's how we set ourselves, or we created ourselves, a timeline which is compiled of specific set of lessons to grow through, right?
Well, just as most people don't know they're creating every moment of their life, very few people realize that they are creating a timeline which reflects them. And within certain frequencies, everybody is very closely in that particular set of frequencies. And by living it, we're creating it.
So I'm curious about one thing which has to do with enlightenment and the change and the possibility, the probability also of changing your own timeline. Because on one side, you have amongst spiritual seekers this concept, as you well know, that enlightenment is something that you have to kind of, put a lot of work in and reach, and it's somewhere out there. And then also on the other side, throughout the ages, you can find people saying, saints and gurus and wise people saying, and that includes you, that it's in the moment and that it's just one instant away, and that it's here for you to grasp. So I'm wondering, like, why or what it is exactly that keeps most people on their timelines and just keeps them regularly proceeding and learning at a kind of slow pace on their timelines versus someone who makes some kind of decision or whatever, and all these timelines collapse in the moment, and it's the moment of truth,
Yeah, I mean, my timeline was the timeline, which was a very common one, of pain and suffering. That was my timeline. So on that timeline, I made a decision that I wanted to be enlightened or dead by 50. Now, that is a foolish thing to do. I should have chosen a sweet, loving, supportive timeline, but I was on a timeline that you only grow through pain and suffering. You've got to remember, like Christianity creates timelines. Catholicism creates a timeline of suffering. Buddhism creates a timeline. Every religion creates a timeline. Football clubs create a timeline. It's birds of a feather flocking together. But in the end, I tackled it the way I was, head down and charge. But in the end, I had to recognize that I was completely, totally beaten. There was nothing left. I was wiped out. I had nothing left in the tank to keep moving forward. And at that point, I surrendered. I gave in, and I didn't give up. And it's like, for me, there was almost as though an inner membrane tore, and then there was this enveloped within a flame and light. And I often said afterwards, enlightenment in light, it means, or it meant. And so I often say to people today, the more love you have for yourself, the more light you draw into yourself and give to other people, the closer you are to that moment of enlightenment. And I love the little story of the Zen story of God was walking on the planet, and he meets a priest, and the priest said, "Hi, God, I recognize you." And God says, "Well, I am surprised." And so the priest says, "I have a question. Would you answer it?" God said, "Yes, as long as you can see me, I'll answer one question." "Thank you, God. How many more lifetimes do I have to go?" "Well, you have 3 more lifetimes." "Oh, God, you mean I've got to go through this shit, this horrible, pious groveling for 3 more lifetimes?" And walked away. And God continued along and came to a village, a simple village. And in the village was the village idiot. And he was laughing and playing. And he called out, "Hi, God." And God said, "You see me?" "Of course I see you, God. I mean, I see you everywhere. And I'm talking to you. And he said, God, I got a question. And he said, God, can you tell me how many more lifetimes I've got? And God said, yes. He said, about 300. And he said, oh, fantastic. 300 more lives of fun and games and joy and laughter. Thank you so much. And as he went dancing off, there was a vast light enveloped him, and he was enlightened. That's how life is. That's how life is. So the more you try, the worse it is. And I spent years of trying and pain. The more you just release yourself to living your joy, your love, your light, the closer you're getting. And that's a timeline. That's a timeline. And the timeline of trying and pain and suffering is a long timeline.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to get to the end of it, or if you're trying to get off it, you're stuck between the tram lines in your timeline. And so if you're just like the village idiot, joyful and prancing all over the place, he just changed timelines like that in that moment because he was so filled with joy. And that's such a beautiful little story. Says it very well.
Very nice. Yeah, it's very nice.
It's not what you know, it's who you are in the moment.
So it's almost like it's just a decision away.
No, a surrender away, a letting go away.
Right. But that is probably a decision, isn't it?
Well, that does require a decision, probably. So yes, you could say in a roundabout way, it's a decision away. I mean, afterwards you look, you laugh because it's so simple. You sort of think, God, I spent 15 years crying. This is ridiculous. All I had to do was allow. And that would a good word I like, allow. Don't try, allow.
And so if we stick to timelines connected to an enlightened form of being, I've heard you say, and I've heard that also in other places, that it's not so much about what you want or what you don't want anymore. It's more like being an instrument of God, of your soul, or just carrying out whatever needs to be carried out in the moment, being wherever you need to be. So is that kind of like a physical embodiment of spherical time almost, where there's no timeline for you anymore, but it's just everything is in the moment?
While you have a body, there is a timeline.
Okay.
And I would say the key word is conscious.
Okay.
You're far more conscious in the moment. That doesn't mean there isn't consciousness is that you're there, but you're far more conscious. And as years go by and you become more and more conscious, then you're more and more connected to all that is. You're more and more connected to life. The aging process slows down because the age is a mark of linear time. So when you divorce from linear time, it continues to a degree in your physical body, but to a lesser degree.
That's why you look like 25.
I wish. Actually, I don't wish. I'm perfectly happy the way I am.
Okay. So
I mean, it's a funny thing. You hear people like me say, I wouldn't go back to 50 or 60 or any other age. I wouldn't go back for any reason, because who I am is a sum total of all of my of me at the moment, and I wouldn't change that for anything. Not to be, certainly not to be a few years younger. No, no way.
I agree. It's nice though to be a baby.
Sometimes I've looked in a supermarket, there's a baby being pushed along, and I said to the mother, that is the age. If only you could know what your baby knows now, the journey would be finished. And they look at me like, this man's mad. And I just smile and say, okay, sorry, and I walk away. But it is, it's all there in the baby. And then it grows up and gets education, and it's all taken away. And then I come along and then I take away as much of the education as I can to get back to the nucleus of who we really are.
So in a way, the goal, if we want to stick to the word goal, could be to become a timelineless being.
I throw away goal. I don't have goals.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
just life and living in this moment. And if you're living in this moment, then what you're wanting is happening. And so there's no goal to set.
And there is no more timeline, really.
Like you could say, well, you set a goal of living 140. In fact, I live my life fully in the moment. I put a figure out, 140, that would be nice. That's a good lifespan, but I have no attachment to it at all. It's just a ballpark figure to throw out there. In other words, that would be setting an intent. But in intent, if there's an attachment to an intent, then you've got a goal. And if the intent has no attachment to it, then it's just left as an intent.
Is there any way that someone on the spiritual path who's now wondering, okay, how does that concept of timelines help me on my spiritual path? Is there any way you would like to give some piece of advice?
Of course, you've heard me say this before. If you consciously choose love for yourself and other people, you're on a beautiful timeline. You're on a timeline that is not overpopulated, and it's a timeline that will take you into greater beauty, greater consciousness. It's the road to be on. Like it's the road of the roads.
That's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you, Michael, for this conversation.
My pleasure. And thank you for listening.
Thank you all you people out there for listening. And as always, make sure to like, share, comment below, and see you in the next session.
Lovely.